So how y'all doing? It's Lugamonger, and this is a Spyderco Urban. I really like this knife. I actually picked this one up because I didn't have any slip joints. I didn't have any, really more modern, higher end slip joint knives. I wanted to get a better experience with it as well. I wanted to get a little bit more of an experience with something that's more legal to carry around the world. And I think the fact that this isn't a lockback, it is a slip joint design, makes it, and it's under 3 inches, makes it a lot easier to carry for a lot more people around the world. And this is a fantastic knife for that. It's very small, it's very easy to carry, it isn't quite as lightweight as actually you might expect. The steel backspacer in here actually runs all the way through, and you can see how thick it is here. So you've got all of this steel actually in the back, giving you the actual retention for the scales themselves. You can see that pin is going through that steel backspacer. And so that gives a lot of rigidity in the actual mechanism itself. You're going to be able to open and close this thing for years and years and years, and that leaf spring here is never actually going to wear out. It's got a whole lot of material. There's a whole lot of metal actually there. And from Spyderco, I do imagine it's probably got a really good temper behind it. So I do have a lot of confidence in the fact that this thing is just going to operate for a very long time. And with that said, the half stop on this is actually harder to disengage than the full stop. The full stop here, you can see I just give a little bit of pressure, and it actually disengages the lock. But this, the way that this half stop is done here is it's actually got, you can see there's that little indent, a little divot right there, taken out of the top of the actual tang of the blade. And what that does is rides in that little ball, right? That little ball detent that actually slides into that right there. That little detent is actually what gives you your lockup, right? And so that little detent is what's snagging on the half stop, and it's harder to disengage this half stop than it is actually with the full stop, which I actually really do like, because this knife, the way that it's done, you've got this little finger choil up here and the coming up on the back. So majority of the forward pressure you're going to deliver with this knife when you're holding it like this is being delivered through this forward section here and the top of the spine of the blade, right? And so you're not actually giving a whole lot of pressure with the actual handle itself when you're going into material or any sort of really heavy push cutting you're having to do. That's the majority of where that's going to lie. So you're not at a whole lot of risk of this knife actually coming down and collapsing on your fingers, even though you do have a finger stuck in the way. But that's not going to stay there. If you've got enough pressure to actually push this knife down and come down to the point where it's going to do serious damage to your hand, this is just going to move out of the way. It's just going to move your skin out of the way if it doesn't take it off with it, and then it's going to continue coming down onto your fingers. So it does have a little bit of security there, but at the same time, I think it's got more confidence. People have more confidence in that protection than I think is actually deserved. That's not to say that it wouldn't work, that you can't actually get any sort of penetration or any sort of draw cutting with this, but that's not really the overall design of this knife. I mean, this is a utility tool. This is designed to separate material. And I got a question in my Q&A video a little while ago: what is my sharpest knife, right? And sharpness is relevant to the latest knife that I sharpened, I think, is the actual answer that I gave. But with that said, right, if you're familiar with a zero grind is where they take the actual bevel all the way down to the cutting edge itself. And so there is no actual secondary bevel on the blade itself. This is not that case. This does have a secondary edge. But with that said, it is ground so thin. This is a Spyderco Dragonfly. It's another little one here, right? And you see the angle of that secondary bevel, or how thick it is, how broad that secondary bevel is. And then I'll actually bring up this Spyderco Urban here, and you see how it's about half? It's about half the thickness, and that's due to a couple factors. It's ground thinner behind the actual edge. The blade stock itself is thinner behind the edge, so there's less of a taper to actually be taken up to actually get down to that V ground edge, you know what I mean? And so it's very thin behind the actual edge, which just delivers an extra added bit of slicing. And as well, it's thinner. It is actually at a steeper angle. I don't know if you can come across, if this is going to come across here, but this here, the Dragonfly, this Paramilitary 2, they're all ground out at about 30 degrees. It's about a 30-degree edge. It's not completely inclusive, but it's about a 30-degree edge. I would put this at a little bit less. This is actually closer to a 22 to 25-degree edge, I would say. So it's ground thinner, and it still has less of a secondary grind, you can see that there, than any of my other knives actually out of the box. If it doesn't have a 0 grind on it, this is the thinnest knife that I have behind the cutting edge. And so this is my Sharpest knife. The Sharpest knife that I own with taking the actual cutting edge out of it. If you're just talking about the grind itself, this little Spyderco right here kind of threw me through a loop. That wasn't something you see in Montego, Italy there. That wasn't something that I actually investigated pulling this thing out of the box. I bought this off of Blade HQ. I saw it was in there, I just had to pick it up. And I bought it because it was a Spyderco Urban. I saw that it was in the K390, which is something I don't actually have enough of an experience with yet to give a really good impression of it. This is more on the knife. I'm not really going to do a review on that steel because I don't have enough actual information for that one. But it was just a little plus because I was going to buy this knife regardless. I was going to buy an Urban regardless. And so that was just a little neat thing that it actually did come in the super steel itself. But I think this knife is definitely a competitive option. You know, if you're concerned about that legality, if you can't carry a locking knife or you're limited to a shorter blade length, this is an excellent option. It still gives you a lot of utility. You've still got a massive amount of slicing power, especially with as thin of a blade stock as this is. You've got that distal taper, and then it's so ridiculously thin behind that actual cutting edge. You can get a lot of work done with this little knife. And as well, it does have that defensive capability behind it, because with a really good grip here, it's really not going to go anywhere because you're got so little to actually penetrate. I mean, you've got less than 3 inches of actual penetration. It's so sharp and it is pointed forward, right? So the majority of the pressure that's going to lie is going to force your knife this way, right? So when you come into material, it's going to force your knife this way. But with your hand in this position here, that actually moves the knife down because you've got that lock up on the spine, right? And so it's not forcing the knife close, it's forcing the knife down. And as long as you've got a really good grip on it, I do think that this knife is going to excel in a lot of different areas. It's going to be one of those good all-around tools. It's not going to be as good as something like the Paramilitary 2 here. Give you a little bit of a size comparison. Or a Griptilian. Look at the scales. What is my camera doing? My camera is messing with... That's cool. Sorry, getting distracted. Give you a little bit of size comparison here. So, I mean, you obviously don't have the cutting power. You don't have the same work potential that you have with these larger knives. That's so cool. Sorry. It's awesomeness. But it's still a very good working knife. And I actually really do like that little bit of weight. The Dragonfly here, which is another one I picked up because I wanted a little bit smaller knife, more easy, you know, more accessible for a lot of people. This is a locking model, but it's still a little bit more accessible worldwide. And with, yeah, it just doesn't feel as good because it doesn't have that weight. You don't need that weight, you know what I mean? It doesn't need it. It's FRN. There are no actual liners in this knife. It's not linered. All of the weight does come from that backspacer on the blade. But still, it just gives me that extra added security. It gives me that little bit of, I know that I have a knife in my hand. I know that I have a tool in my hand, and I trust it because of that actual weight. And I know that's all just mental jazz that I'm doing to myself. It actually has almost no play in reality, but that's how I feel. So this knife does make me feel good, as well as it just having, woo, excellent potential if I don't slice myself on camera. Kind of wish I did. That would have been an excellent ending for this video. Y'all have a good one.